Well, the Browns are going back to a more analytics-based approach with Paul DePodesta running things. Andrew Berry, of course, who was hired here back in 2016 and then left to go to Philadelphia for a year. Again, a very analytics-driven organization in the Eagles. Now, Ellis, I know you weren't here in 2016, but you've read up a lot on kind of what it was like back then. So I am curious kind of your perspective when you see how it's built now and what you kind of know about back then. Do you see differences here?
I do. So from what I've read, and I think the golden child for all this is with analytics is the selection of David Njoku. All right, he tests well, he looks great, and all these things. So you slide up and make him a first-round selection, and then you give him the eye test. And look, could he become a good football player down the line? Sure, but as soon as he gets on the field, you can tell he's a little choppy. The hands aren't the best, things like that. So that's 2016. Now you look at the new regime. And you get a guy like Kevin Stefanski, who I think really calmed everyone's nerves, or at least mine, at his opening presser when he said, look, analytics is just using information to make better decisions. It's really that simple. So you think a guy like Kevin Stefanski, who's been around the game for 14 years in Minnesota, played collegiately, as you just wrote about, he's got an eye for football players. So to me, it feels like you found a balance between the football mind and the football guy and the numbers guy. So I think that's got to be the biggest difference between Sashi Brown 2016 and what's going on now. I think that even though the front office might not be littered with the football minds and the hard-nosed scout grinders, I think Stefanski is in his roots a football guy who just so happens to use information to make better decisions.
Yeah, and I think the team is in a different place too. When Sashi Brown came in, it was about asset acquisition, right? Yep. And it also meant passing up on some pretty good players, not just quarterbacks, but you look at that top 5 of that draft that he traded out of back in 2016. A lot of good players in that draft. They decided to pass on a guy like Deshaun Watson at number 12 and traded down. And then, of course, look, that netted them Denzel Ward eventually. They did some things that worked out, but it was about asset acquisition. This is a team that wants to start winning. And I think the key here is a lot of the talk has been not necessarily about we're going to go out and just acquire a bunch of assets and create a bunch of space. It's we're going to use as much information as we can get. And Andrew Berry, a guy with a background in scouting, a guy who came up as a scout. Hopefully you have that guy that can marry I'm going to sit in the stands and watch this guy and tell you if he's good or not, because you need that. And then also the guy that's going to say, these testing numbers project a really, really good football player.
Right.
And then, of course, Kevin Stefanski and his decision-making in Game 2 will be influenced by that.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it there, Dan. It's Berry, it's Stefanski. They have the eye for the game and the nose for football, and they use that information to back it up. We've got the draft coming up. Of course, if some stuff starts going weird, the selections, that might be the first cue that, okay, maybe it's time to worry. But based on their history, I don't think we've got a 2016 situation on our hands.
Well, if the Browns do trade out of the number 10 pick and acquire more picks later in the first round, I'm just going to shut down Twitter for the remainder of the night. But I won't shut down Football Insider. I will be texting you. Ellis will be texting you. Mary Kay and Scott will be texting you. But you've got to go to cleveland.com/Browns and sign up. Click on the blue banner at the top of the page.